Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Law School Show. My name is Amos Vang, and I will be your host for this episode. This is what perseverance is. It takes perseverance to represent clients resolutely and fervently in the courts, and it takes perseverance to stand out on the world stage. Training, preparation, and practice are three of the most important things for a person to thrive in each and every one of these areas. So, it is no surprise that my guest for today is a person that has not only succeeded in both areas, but has also become a leader in both areas. My guest is Olympic bronze medalist Sandrine Mainville. Sandrine is a labor and employment lawyer at Borden Ladner Gervais in Montreal. But she is more commonly known as one of Canada's greatest swimmers of the 21st century. Sandrine began swimming at age 11, and in 2013, she won a bronze medal and set a Canadian short course record in the women's 100-meter freestyle at a World Cup event in Berlin. That same year, Sandrine set a Canadian record with a fifth-place finish in the women's 4x100 freestyle relay. And Sandrine also won bronze in the women's 4x100-meter freestyle relay at the 2013 Universiade. In 2014, Sandrine won the Sprinters Cup at the 2014 Canadian Inter-University Sport Championships, now known as the Youth Sports Canada Championships. In 2015, at the FINA World Championships in Kazan, Russia, Sandrine struck bronze again in the 4x100-meter mixed freestyle event. That same year, Sandrine, alongside Michelle Williams, now Michelle Toro, Catherine Savard, and Chantal Van Landeghem, struck gold in the women's 4x100-meter freestyle relay and set a Pan Am Games record. In 2016, Sandrine finished third in the women's 100-meter freestyle at the 2016 Olympic and Paralympic trials in Toronto. And in that same year, Sandrine won bronze at the 2016 Rio Olympic Games in the women's 4x100-meter freestyle relay against the powerhouse teams of the United States and Australia. After winning a couple more medals at subsequent FINA World Championships and setting a new U Sports record in the women's 100-meter freestyle at the 2018 U Sports Swimming Championships, Sandrine would retire from the world of swimming in 2018. During the years of 2015 to 2018, Sandrine was balancing her swimming and Olympic career with a Bachelor of Laws at l'Université de Montreal, along with practicing labor and employment law, and along with a focus on dispute settlement. Sandrine is a member of the board of directors of the Sport Dispute Resolution Centre of Canada, the Sdrcc. Sandrine is known as a multi-medalist and a world championship level swimmer. But here at the Law School Show, we know Sandrine as something else, a legend. With a power level of over 9,000, Sandrine Mainville joins me on the show today. Sandrine, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Well, thank you for having me.
So let's start off from the beginning. And normally what I would ask my guests as the first question is, what inspired you to go to law school? But for your case, it's a lot more appropriate to go even further before that. What inspired you to pursue swimming?
Well, my both parents were athletes when they were younger. And so I guess when I was a child, I used to do a lot of different sports. And eventually, I guess I was just doing sports for fun on the weekends with my friends. And when I got to the age of 11, they told me that it might be a good thing if I chose one sport in particular and just put all my energy in that sport to see where it would lead me. And at first I wanted to try gymnastics because that's all my friends did. But my parents saw me and saw my physiology, and they thought that maybe I was too tall to do that. And they knew that there's a lot of injuries in that sport. So they kind of pushed me to try swimming because they saw that when I was doing swimming lessons, I was quite fast. And so I was like, yeah, for sure. So I tried swimming. I kind of liked it. I made some friends. I improved a lot in the first couple of years. And so that's what got me motivated. So that's pretty much how I got started.
And that start would, of course, be quite an interesting one. And take us back to your first ever swim meet. So the very first time that you swam competitively, what was it like? And what, if you could remember, of course, what did you prepare? What did you do to prepare for that meet?
Honestly, I don't even remember my first ever meet, but I remember one that was my first important meet. I think I was 15 years old, or maybe I was 13 years old. It was Quebec Games in 2005. So yeah, I was 13 years old. Quebec Games. So, I mean, Quebec Games is for 15 years old and younger, so it's not very big, but back then for me, it was the biggest thing ever. And I went there, and to be honest, I learned so much from that experience because, you know, when you're starting something new, you don't really trust yourself. You don't really know what you're doing. You're competing, or you're doing that with people around you, and everybody else looks like they're mastering what they're doing, and you feel like you have no idea what you're doing. And so that's exactly what happened to me. I was entered in the 50-meter butterfly, and how it works in swimming is that you have preliminaries in the morning and then finals at night. And after the preliminaries, I was second. And so I had kind of like good chances to come first at the finals. But because I didn't trust myself, and because the person that was seated first was 2 years older than me, I thought, well, for sure, I'm not going to come first. I'm just going to go and try my best, but I don't think I can touch the wall first. And my coach looked at me and he said, you know what, if you have confidence, if you trust yourself, you might come first. And he just told me that. It went from one ear, went back, you know, I didn't even listen to him because to be honest, trust is not something that has to come from outside, you know, it has to come from within. And at that time, I guess I didn't have it. And so I went into the finals. At the end, I finished second by 0.02, so 200ths of a second. And, you know, in sports, it's like, it happens all the time. But, you know, when it happens to you at that moment, I thought, you know, I'm pretty sure if I had trust myself, if I had confidence, I might have gone first. And so I guess at that point, I realized how confidence and how trusting yourself, trusting the process was so important. So it might not have been my first meet, but it was like the first one that really taught me something good, big lesson for me to continue in my career.
Absolutely. And even though I'm not an athlete, but as a classical pianist that used to compete in the national classical music competitions, I can relate to that a lot because for what I found, being able to have self-confidence and trust, that's something that really comes with practice, right? And for your swimming career, of course, you've had to go through a lot of practices, a lot of workouts, sessions with your coaches. For me, as we were speaking before we started recording, my mom was actually my piano teacher for most of my life. So for myself, it wasn't just the practicing, but at home, my mom would also really push me to be the best possible pianist that I could be. Well, I fell into piano when I was 3 years old, of course. And I actually, apparently, my mom said that I asked her if I could learn piano, and that's what happened. But essentially, like at the end of the day, you need someone to guide you through and to put you in the right direction, right? And for me, like from when I was starting to perform for the first time when I was a kid, I wasn't really nervous, but I was just thinking, like, is the practice that I'm doing correct? Am I actually playing the piece correctly? And then turns out the answer was yes, and and it turns out people were actually interested in my performances, and that's what really happened afterwards. And that was many years ago. But yeah, I can relate to the self-confidence and the issue of self-confidence, and I think a lot of law students can relate to that as well, especially those who are in first year who have no idea how. Well, some of them may have no idea how in the world do I get into law school, right? It's like, well, it's like I'm here. I feel like I'm not sure if I belong here, but over time, that's when you have to understand that you're here for a reason in law school. You have the skills, you have the potential. All you have to do is realize it. And that comes through practice and hard work. And I think a lot of law students will very much relate to that at the end of the day, to your own personal experiences and to some of the challenges that you faced early on.
Mm-hmm. But I think you got to realize that, like you said, it comes from experience too. So you cannot just pretend, at first that like you're going to have all the confidence in the world. I think it's normal at the beginning that you're like trying to, test the waters, doing something, and eventually you're going to learn from every experience. But I feel like you have to kind of like accept that trust is not going to be there completely at first. It's just something that you're going to build through the years. And I guess you just got to remember that it happened to everybody, to every great lawyer, every great athlete. I'm pretty sure that not everybody just started from day one and thought, like, I'm the greatest in the world. I know exactly what to do, So you just got to accept, trust the process, and trust that eventually you're going to be great.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's the reason why, as we'll get into later on in this episode, in swimming, as you know, there's so many different levels of championships. There's the regional championships, and then there's the provincial championships. There's national juniors, national seniors, and then trials, and then world championships or Olympics. And yeah, and each it's like a goalpost for each and every person who's swimming and trying to compete at the top levels. Each goalpost in each level, how far are you able to make it, and what you're doing right, what you're doing wrong, and you learn from that experiences. It's also a similar thing in law as well. Of course, aside from the marks and the bell curving that takes place in many of the law schools in Canada, there's also a lot of understanding where you stand in terms of your knowledge of the law and how you can apply it and how you're able to perform as well in a legal setting. It really is a matter of just getting experience. And for your case, when you started realizing that you were getting higher and higher in the competition levels, what were some of the early challenges that you faced early on in your swimming career, and that you would see, for the middle part of your career? What were some of the challenges that you faced?
That's a really good question. I guess making good choices, because so when I was younger, I didn't really ask myself any questions. I didn't have a plan. I just did what I was supposed to do, and it was more like a short-term goal. What am I going to do tomorrow? What is my next competition? But not necessarily that I want to go to the Olympics in how many years, or I want to be the best in the world. I was just really like in the moment. I went to Canada Games. I was 17 years old in 2009, and I did some really good performance there. And I guess if it was just for me, I would have come back home and just kept going like that until I don't know what would have happened. But I was lucky enough to have a good team around me. So my dad, like I said, had an athlete past, and he was also really, he was, looking out for me and wanted me to go like to the best, to furthest that I could go in swimming, because he knew that it was just a great experience. So he actually talked to the right people, and that's when I moved from my little hometown to go train at the National Center in Montreal, where I could train with the best in Canada there. So I guess it's not really a challenge, but it's just something, I guess, that was important for me. And I was lucky enough to have people around me to make the right decisions for me. Eventually, I'm not going to talk about like all the challenges that I had in my career, but I feel like that was like the first stepping stone in my career, where it really led me to the next step. And from there, like, my mind was just like somewhere else. Eventually, when I got there and I trained with the best in Canada, like my objectives kind of like shaped themselves because of how we were training, what our goals were. Everybody there wanted to go to the Olympics, and not just go to the Olympics, they wanted to perform at the Olympics. So so it was just great for me to go there. But and then, like I said, I'm not going to talk about all my challenges in my career. Eventually, I had an injury. Eventually, they closed the national center in Montreal, and blah blah blah. So, but I guess the first one that I realized was important as an athlete, but I was also just in life in general to be able to make the right choices, and it might be hard in the moment, but you got to get out of your comfort zone sometimes to reach the next level and improve and just kind of like see what's out there and what's available for you. And I guess I don't know about you, but I also apply that in my professional career now. Sometimes it's easy to just keep going every day is going to be trying the best that you can, but what else is there, and what else can you do? What else can you do to not only improve your career, but see if, there's something else out there that you can do that can fulfill your goals. And you might not even know that those are your goals eventually, but you're only gonna know that this is interesting or that is a goal that you wanted if you're curious and if you're open to that, and if you make the right decisions to always stay open to those options, I guess.
Absolutely, yeah. And for me, it's a similar experience in this way as well. Of course, nowhere close to your level, of course, but I do relate a lot to it, and I think a lot of people can relate to the fact that not everyone has a good day. Not every day is going to be a good day. There are going to be some bad days or some mediocre days, but it's a part of the growing process in the legal world, in a legal career, and really in any career that you or I or anyone really chooses to pursue in the near or far future. And I think a lot of us can relate to that because, I mean, we're human. I mean, all of us, we have our ups and our downs, our trials and our triumphs, and it's a matter of overcoming these. And I know it may sound, for some of our audience, it may sound a bit cliche, but it really is just a matter of being able to overcome it, not just by yourself, of course, but with the support group that you have and with the family or friends that you have along the way. It's really like a group process. And I think, especially in my brief exposure to broadcasting swimming, I see a lot of that. I see a lot of that at competitions, and also outside of competitions, a lot of camaraderie amongst the swim clubs and the swim teams and the swimmers in general. Everyone's just cheering on each other, and it's really a test of pushing past your limits, breaking through those limits, and reaching that goal. I see a lot of that at competitions.
Well, I think it's because, we go through like really hard stuff. Training is hard, but also, positive experiences too, like we travel together. So training is hard, but then afterwards, like we do everything else together that, it's like bad and good moments. And, like relationships are shaped when you experience really intense experience, I guess. And so it's like that with swimming, but I'm sure it's like that with every group of athletes. And it's kind of like the same in a law firm, because I don't know about you in articling, but for me, when I was articling, so we were a group of 6 people, and it was, so in Quebec, it's 6 months of articling. And during those 6 months, it was so hard, but at the same time, so rewarding. And so you're going through ups and downs. You stay late together, you shape relationships like that. And so I think it's really important to, be close to those people, because you're living the same thing as them. They understand you, but at the same time, that, you're all going through the same thing, and you can, count on each other if something bad is happening, or if you're at the end getting a job, then you can all celebrate together. So it's really nice to have a group of people around you like that.
Absolutely. The thing about law that, contrary to popular belief, is that law is not an individual pursuit. It's very much a collaborative and a teamwork pursuit. And yeah, in my articling experience, it's just a similar situation. It's all about teamwork. And if you've got questions, you got to ask those questions, because it's better to figure out what you don't know than, to be caught or exposed for what you don't know at a later date when it really matters, when that case is hinging on that particular point that you don't know, right? And that comes with experience, and that comes with asking questions. The whole point of articling is to get practical experience and to learn more about that practice of law, and to make the mistakes early on, so you won't make them when it really matters in your legal practice. Of course, those mistakes do matter even as an articling student, but even more so in a legal practice, because you don't want clients to be missing out on something that, I mean, they're entitled to, or you don't want clients, some of their interests not being represented at all. That's not a good thing at all. But yeah, it's all about that collaborative experience and all about that teamwork that helps you get to that level, helps you get to a level where you can approach it very confidently in a legal practice.
Yeah, I guess now that I think about it, law is like swimming, you know, like at first you think that it's individual, but at the end, it's really about team.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. Unfortunately, I can't really say the same for classical piano, though. Because the thing about classical piano is that it's very insular. It's a very insular kind of environment. We tend to, as classical pianists, we tend to practice on our own, very much on our own. We would sit 5, 6, 7, 8 hours a day practicing many different repertoire. And sometimes if there's a certain piece, whether it may be a sonata or concerto, where we struggle on a specific part, and we'd be drilling that part over and over and over. Maybe we might take a break and kind of walk away if we can't get that part down. But when we come back, we have a fresh mind, and we would just practice. But there's not a lot of collaboration between pianists, especially when you're at a competition. It's very much, you don't even know who's competing, first of all. So they could be all across the province or all across the country, and that would be the first time you ever hear them play. But what is interesting is that, at least when I was competing in 2012 at the Canadian Music Competition, what I found was that even when they're practicing and warming up, I already hear ideas, because in classical music, it's all about ideas and interpretation, artistic interpretation. What I found was that you can even get different ideas off of listening to them practicing. Now, imagine what you can do when you listen to them performing, right? It's very much like, it's very individualistic for classical piano. I'm not sure about other classical instruments. For an orchestra, it would be a lot more collaborative, because an orchestra is a group of people, of course, right? But for a pianist, it's very much you, and your piano teacher. In this case, it was my mom and my second piano teacher that I had also later on in my career. But yeah, it's something that I guess I missed out on as a classical pianist that you were able to enjoy as a swimmer. So that's something that I wish I had.
You know what? So I was doing piano when I was younger. So I learned, like maybe from 8 to 12 years old. My parents wanted me to play the piano, so I took lessons, and I guess the reason why I stopped is because I thought it was too individualistic. So I didn't like the fact that I had to practice for several hours in my parents' living room, just being by yourself with my piano. I thought, it wasn't for me. But I'm so, I guess I have some regrets now, because when I hear people play piano, I think it's so incredible, and it's just amazing. So good for you that you were able to keep going like that.
Well, I have my mom and my dad. I have both of my parents to thank for that. If it wasn't for them being able to push me, I wouldn't have had the experiences that I've had. And it's never too late to learn piano too. The most recent winner of the International Chopin competition, Bruce Liu, who, by the way, is the very first Canadian to win first prize at this competition. We've never had a Canadian that won first prize. We had one, Charles Hamelin, who won second, and Tony Yang, who won fifth, but we never had one who won first. But this year was the first time. Bruce said that he started very late, actually, but he's still, and look where he is now. He's now one of the most well-known pianists in the 21st century, and he's proudly representing Canada, of course. And it's never too late to learn piano. We had there's another Russian pianist. I think he started at 17, and he's one of the most technical pianists. Like he he would give even a lot of 20-year-olds a run for their money, the people who are in a similar situation. It's never too late for piano, but yeah, it's never too late. You can always go in again, I have my parents to thank for this. But enough about my piano past. Let's get back to your swimming career. And I want to go to 2008 because you from your Team Canada profile, it said that you were inspired to compete in the Olympics rather after watching the 2008 Olympic trials. And from a layperson's perspective, again, like I mentioned earlier, most people don't necessarily realize that there are actually so many different levels of competition way before the Olympics. So regionals, provincials, nationals, national juniors, national seniors, trials, and then the World Championships and the Olympics. And there's also short course and long course as well. So why was the 2008 Canadian Olympic trials so inspirational to you? What was it? What about it changed your approach and your view of swimming?
That's, again, a really good question. And every time I tell about that story, I always have the same vision in my head. And it's the vision that led me to eventually want to go to the Olympics. And so it was my first time at the Olympic trials. It was in Montreal at the Olympic Stadium. I wasn't swimming there yet. I was still training in my hometown in Boucherville. And so first Olympic trials, I went there, and again, there's preliminaries in the morning, finals at night. I wasn't fast enough yet to make the finals. So what I did was I made the preliminaries in the morning, and then at night, I was just watching the finals from the stands, or I guess I was on the pool deck and just watching people. And so I guess every single event that I was able to watch at night was so inspirational. And I can't tell you exactly, I guess I don't even remember the race, but I just remember, so how it went is that when they touched the wall, the announcer was able to tell them right away if they made the cut to make the Olympics. It's not like that anymore, because now the criteria change, and there's like a discretionary criteria now, and so you only know at the end of the meet if you actually made the Olympics. But back then in 2008, you knew right when you touched the wall if you made it. And so you touch the wall and you just hear the announcer, I guess, scream that you made the Olympic team. So can you imagine being at the Olympic Stadium with, I don't know how many people can fit in the stands, and just, it's like the result of so many years of training. You finally made it. You have your friends, you have your coach, you have your family around you, and you hear the announcer telling you that you made the Olympic team in front of everybody, and to look at them, to look at the swimmers in the pool, the face that they made, the smiles that they had, it was just so inspirational. I'm pretty sure I looked at them and I had a smile too, like I could feel what they were feeling. And so at that moment, I told myself, one day it's going to be me in the water and the announcer is going to tell me that I made the Olympic team. At that moment, I knew it's going to be me one day. And it was clear at that moment that everything that I was going to do, every, decision that I would make, it would be to eventually make the Olympic team. But I know that you said that, it's not just the Olympics in life, but it's still, when you're an amateur athlete, it's still kind of like the main goal. I still really enjoyed everything else in my swimming career, not just the Olympics itself. But I guess it always stayed in my mind that I wanted to go there. So, yeah.
Yeah. And 2008, as you know, was a really big year for Olympic swimming. I mean, Michael Phelps,
Yeah.
And his absolutely historic performance, 8 gold medals in a single Olympics. Nobody has ever reached that in the history of the Olympics, the modern Olympics. And even as just a regular layperson, just a regular spectator, when I watched those swims, for me, it was the actual Olympics. I didn't really know too much about the trials and national championships back then. Just seeing the relays and seeing the individual performances and just hearing that energy, like you said, in the announcers when they hit the wall, And especially with Michael Phelps when he hits it, when he was second. I remember this was when I think it was the 100. Was it the 100? I think it was the 100-meter butterfly.
Butterfly, yeah.
Yeah, he was right behind Michael Cavich, and then at the last second, literally 1/100th of a second, that last push touches the wall. And I was watching on NBC. They were just like, "He does it again!" Ah!
Yeah.
People were just
something happened there. Like, I don't know what happened. Everybody thought he was second.
Yeah.
And those 8 gold medals were definitely something. And it's funny because now that I think about it, like 2008, that's when I realized that I wanted to make the Olympic team. In 2004, I didn't even know what the Olympics were almost. Like, or if no, maybe I'm exaggerating, but like I was not watching it. I had, no knowledge of, what was happening exactly. I was not really interested in the Olympics. And it's crazy to think that 4 years later, that happened, and that led me to eventually like have my own goal of wanting to make the Olympic team. And it goes back to what I was saying before. You never know eventually like what kind of like opportunities is going to come in your life, and eventually those goals are going to shape as you go in your life. But you might start something at the beginning. So I started in 2003. So in 2004, I should have known what the Olympics were, but I guess I was like too focused on the day-to-day, living the moment, that I had no idea that it was like even an option. And it's just 5 years later that eventually, it became an option. So I guess going back to my law career, I'm starting now, like I'm almost like 2 years in, like I almost have like 2 years of practice, and, I'm still testing the waters. I still don't know like what I want to do exactly, but you got to like trust that eventually it's just going to appear, and it might not be tomorrow, it might not be 2 years, but eventually I'm pretty sure that it's going to come up, and everything is going to make sense. Maybe I'm being too, I don't know.
No.
I know it doesn't make sense for some people, but for me, I kind of like the fact that I don't know, but eventually it's going to be more clear.
No, I get it. Yeah, I think a lot of people understand that too, and especially since you and I are roughly in the same age group as well, and a lot of our audience, not all of them, of course, but most of our audience is also within 20-something-year-old to 30-something-year-old range. We can definitely relate to just having that opportunity, and just being very very hopeful for that opportunity, and just waiting. Why can't it just come now? Like we're impatient for it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's something that, especially now with law being increasingly competitive as a career, each and every year, it's just wow. Like the number of people going through law school, it hasn't really changed, but the competition for the jobs are getting fiercer and fiercer and fiercer, because again, similar to swimming, the requirements have changed. It's really important for us to, even though we're focusing on trying to be competitive, also understand that opportunities will come in. And that's also a big issue where in just as a brief aside, in law there's also a lot of issues with mental health issues, because sometimes we push ourselves too hard to the extent where we're actually self-doubting ourselves and second guessing ourselves. And that is, and again, it's a problem that the legal career is facing. But that's why we have to remind ourselves that, number one, just because it doesn't happen now doesn't mean that it won't happen later, right? And it's all about a matter of patience. And this is something that I'm learning as well. Number one. Number two, you're not going through this alone. You've got a whole group of other people around you, and I don't mean this just to say it as a cliche. Like, I genuinely mean it. There's everyone has a support system that they can turn to, whether it's family or friends, to help them through difficult times. And the legal career and swimming career, like you said, it's very similar, because in this situation, you would approach it the same way, right? With the support systems and everything, and the training and the practice. It's so important to remember this. And sometimes I think a lot of people in our own personal peer groups, respectively, tend to forget that. And I think it's an important reminder overall.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree.
So, but yeah, 2008, like you said, an inspirational year. And for you, as a result, your next step would be preparing for the 2012 Olympic trials. And at the time, you were pursuing health sciences at Sdrcc, in a Sdrcc program. How did you balance your time between training and pursuing health sciences during that time?
I guess I gave the time that it took for everything to be, I guess, perfect, because I'm a perfectionist, like a lot of us in law, I guess. I didn't want to like jeopardize my school or my swimming because I was doing both at the same time, but I wanted to do both at the same time. So what I did was that I was going part-time in school and 100% in swimming. You can't really be part-time in swimming at that point. So, but school you can, because I knew that I guess that the window of opportunity for swimming was from this age to this age, but school, it's going to take as long as it takes, you know. I didn't want to rush it, and it was really important for me to do both at the same time for two reasons. The first reason is to keep a balance. And I think it's pretty clear, like we often talk about, you know, especially now, to have a balance in your life, to not only have one thing, because if that one thing is doing bad, then, you know, your whole life is, you know, bad because you experienced something that was, you know, but if you have something else, you can kind of rely on that other area of your life. And so I think it's really important to have two things, especially as an athlete, to have, you know, if it's not school, to have something else to, you know, kind of like keep a sense of your life, you know, because if it's just about swimming or, you know, sport, it's so, sometimes I felt like I was in another world when I was swimming, because it's so different from real world. Your life is, you know, it's hard to explain, but it's really different. You know, like you can't go out at night because you have to save your energy. You know, like you just sleep, train, eat well. It's really weird. So I had to have something else that I could, you know, be in the real world. The second reason for me that it was important to do school at the same time was because I didn't want to, you know, retire from sport and not have anything else that I would just like be able to jump on. There's a lot of athletes who they might have like finished high school, but they didn't go to Cégep or they didn't go to university. And so going back to square one in school when you're like maybe late 20s is really hard. So either they're not going back to school or they're just staying in sport for way too long because they're kind of scared to retire because they know that nothing else is waiting for them after. And I think, I don't want to say it's sad, but a little bit, because you don't want retirement to be, you know, hard. It has to come naturally. And it'll come naturally if eventually it clicks in your head that that other part in your life is just waiting for you and you want to experience that. And that's exactly what happened to me. I, you know, finished everything at the same time, you know, like my swimming and my professional life, like I did both, but not professional, sorry, like your school, I did both at the same time. And I finished my school and my swimming almost at the exact same time. So I was able to switch to go to Borden Ladner Gervais, the law firm that I'm at right now, when I retired. So I started working there. It was my first summer. I was not articling yet, but it was just like a summer student position. And I was still swimming at the same time. And after 2 weeks, I just called my coach and I said, you know what, I'm done. I found something else. I found what, you know, what motivates me outside of swimming. And right now, that's what I want to do. I want to be 100% in this job. I was, you know, 50% in my school for so many years that I wanted to start my professional career on the right foot. And for me, it meant 100%. And it was not forced, you know, like it like I said, it clicked in my head. I was like, this is what I want to do. I did what I had to do in swimming. I achieved the goals that I had, and it just came natural for me. So, but I guess to answer your question is just to, have good priorities, be able to make the right decisions. And that's what I would say to young athletes when they start to keep school at the same time. And even for professionals, just having your career sometimes can be really, really hard, because if it's not going well one day at the job, then you have to have something else that you can rely on. Even like it can be your family, it can be amateur sport on the side, I don't know what, piano, something else that you can rely on. I think is really important.
Absolutely, yes. And what you mentioned just now, it brings to mind also what Governor General or former Governor General David Johnston told me as well in his interview. And at the time of this recording, this would have been 3 days after I recorded the interview with the Governor General, the former Governor General. And he said that it was a similar thing, because he actually had not just one time, but 2 times where he could have actually gone in the NHL. The first time was when he was still in high school, and there was a scout named Jimmy Skinner who would later become the head coach of the Detroit Red Wings during the 50s and the 60s. And he actually won a couple of Stanley Cups as well. Mr. Johnston told me that his mom essentially said no to the NHL, because a lot of the guys back then in the 50s, when you went to the NHL, you didn't go to school. Like, that's it. NHL was your full-time career. And Mr. Johnston told me on the law school show, his mom had a very good grounding in terms of understanding what an education can do for you, because you can't play hockey forever, right? There's going to come a point where you're going to get old, and there's a new next generation of hockey athletes who will be coming in, who will be taking your place as well, who become the next best as well. So you need to have a road that comes out that is not related to the sports world, in case, once you finish your career in sports. And for him, that's what led him to law. And as we all know now, he's served as the former Governor General of Canada. So yeah, he said the same thing and a similar thing as well. Same thing with music, honestly, unless you are going through the classical music realm. Although even then, like, you can't just perform all the time. You need to have recording deals. You need to have CDs, if they still use CDs nowadays. Now it's all streaming now. You need to have a specific road ahead. Otherwise, your performance, unless you become like Martha Argerich or Long Long or Arkady Volodos, I mean, the chances are you won't be able necessarily to perform forever, right? Like, you need to have another route out, and that's why some of them will turn to teaching music or teaching music at a professorship or at a university. So yeah, it's a very similar situation. I think that people need to realize that the world of sports and the world of music really they're very, I don't want to say they're insulated worlds, but they're very different worlds, like, compared to, I don't want to say the real world, but the actual overall, the regular person society, right? So there's definitely a big difference between those ones that I think a lot of people need to understand.
And I guess a proof that it works to have both areas in your life. In 2012 and in 2016, I didn't go to school at all, because I thought, like, it's the Olympic year. I'm going to, be 100% in swimming, and I don't want to go to school because I want to have, more time to recover. Because if you're going to school at the same time, the chances are, like, you can't have a nap in the middle of the day and everything. Everybody know that when you're an athlete, napping is really important. But during those years, like, I just did swimming. I didn't go to school, and my performance was not that much like greater because I didn't have school. It was like, every year I improved a little bit my times, but it didn't improve that much because I didn't go to school. And it kind of like showed me that, your body kind of adapts to every kind of situation. And so if your body is used to, like, not napping in the middle of the day, but go to school and like kind of like switch your brain to something else to, make you realize that there's other things in life, it might be even better than napping, like, I don't know. So it kind of like made me realize that that's, you know, that's when I realized that it was important to have a good balance in your life.
Absolutely, absolutely. Balance, like you said, is so important. I think a lot of people are realizing that now, especially with COVID, with everything shut down or now starting to open up at the time of this recording, but now still with big worries about whether or not we're going to go back into lockdown again because of the recent Omicron variant. It's it's so important to have that regular balance because I think a lot of people forgot about that in general with not only in the legal careers, but in any career. I think a lot of people have forgotten of that work-life balance in general, right? And it's at the end of the day, you're working to live, but you're not living to work. Like your entire existence isn't just made for the purpose to work. Your existence is much more than that. And this will sound very cliche and very very cheesy, but that's just the reality. You're defined by like the things that you enjoy doing and the people around you. So that's a great and important reminder for all of us. And returning to your time in swimming, you mentioned 2012 and 2016. I'm glad you mentioned that because between those 4 years, those were some defining years in your swimming career development. And I don't want to open up old wounds, but you barely missed the London Olympics, like barely missed it. But then you changed training centers and moved to Ontario to train in Toronto at the High Performance Center in Ontario. So what were some of the greatest challenges that you faced during those 4 years, and how did you overcome those challenges?
You know what? Now that I think about it, in 2012, I know it sounds cheesy, but everything happens for a reason, and I'm glad that I didn't make the team in 2012 because the team was faster in 2016, and I'm pretty sure that if I had made the team in 2012, I wouldn't have made like everything that I did between 2012 and 2016 to eventually make the team in 2016 and win a medal in a Rio. So in 2012, it was really hard when I touched the wall and I saw that I came, this close to making the team. It was really hard on the moment, but as soon as the Olympics were done in London, I told myself, I turned the page. I looked for the next season and watch me for the next trial. So I guess the biggest challenges during those 4 years, well, the first one is, I just mentioned that I had just turned the page in 2012 to look forward for the next season. Well, I got an injury in October 2012, so only after 2 months after the start of the season. So I have a scoliosis. I have two scoliosis in my back. You can tell when I'm standing that I have one shoulder a bit higher than the other. And so eventually, with swimming, you turn your arms quite a lot. So eventually it created tension in my shoulder and it just blocked one day. I couldn't use my arms. It lasted for around 3 months that I couldn't use my arms. So, and it's crazy because now that I'm saying to you, it took 3 months, but in the moment, you don't know how long it's going to take. And you think that it's going to take forever and your career is over and maybe you'll need surgery and it's the end of the world. And during those 3 years, I was just, control. That's when I realized that you can only control what you can control. So I can control, I had no power on my arms, but I had power on my legs. So I really worked on my legs during those 3 months. I did, kicking, I did weights training for my legs, everything that I could, to put my energy on the things that I could, use. And eventually, that injury disappeared. I was able to implement back my arms into the swimming with my legs that were, at a next level. And it's almost as if it helped me. It helped me to have that injury because it gave me the opportunity to focus on something else and improve that part that eventually became so important because a lot of people think that swimming is about the upper body, but when you have a big machine that pushes you towards, it changes the game for dives, for turns, for kick is really important. So Eventually I made my first senior national team that year, so in 2013. So in April, I was still able to make the team, even though I had that injury for 3 months. So it was a really big thing for me. The second big challenge that I had during those 4 years, like I had mentioned it a little bit before, they closed the National Center in 2014. So I had been training there since 2009. So 5 years later, they decided to shut down the training center in Montreal. So it was like, 2 years before the Olympics, I had to make a decision because I could stay in Montreal, but we would have less funding. We wouldn't have, the team around us that, I had used for so many years, and I thought that was really helpful. So I decided to go to Vancouver and Toronto to see if there were good training centers. And eventually the coach in Toronto, it just really clicked with this guy. He's British. He was coming from the UK. He had a really good background with sprints, women in sprints. So it was exactly for me. And, he's really charming. And so when I went there, he convinced me to go train with him. And that's how the whole, Toronto National Center got started for real. Like, today there's like Penny Oleksiak, Taylor Ruck, Maggie McNeil, Tiny Mass. I don't know if I'm saying names right now that people don't know, but they're all like the big girls, like the big swimmers right now in the world of swimming for women. They all train there. Well, everything for that National Center started, I guess, and I don't want to brag, but kind of in 2014, when I went there. Penny actually came in 2015. We all made the team together in 2016. And again, it was really hard on the moment for me to move from Montreal to Toronto. I didn't really speak English back then. I went to school in English, because I had started law school in 2013. So I decided to do like 1 year at the University of Toronto, like as an exchange student. And again, I was talking before about getting out of your comfort zone. It was like the biggest challenge of my career, I think, because it was so, out of my comfort zone, but at the next level, because, it was, the environment itself was just like so crazy. But it was the best decision of my life, because that's what, I think got me to where I was. In 2016, not only did I make the team, but we won a medal together. And I think, that 2 years that I was there was really, really, important in my career. And when I think about swimming, I always think about those 2 years. It's not even the last 2 years of my career, because I retired in 2018, but it was just so, I don't know, important. And it was stressful. I'm not going to say that it was always pink. We say it in French, like it's not la vie n'est pas seulement rose. It was not just pink. It was like a lot of stress and a lot of hard moments. But eventually that's what like shaped me to become a better athlete. And it was just, looking back at it, it was just such a great experience.
Yeah, I can imagine. And I think you mentioned the coach. I think it was Ben Titley, right?
Yes. Yeah.
So yeah, I've heard a lot of great things about him as well in the past. And yeah, I mean, and for those of you who don't know, Ben Titley was the coach when Penny Oleksiak was swimming, and still swimming, of course, and when she was there, and a lot of the other high performance center Ontario athletes when they were training there. Like he was a very instrumental part of the coaching staff there. And as Sandrine has said, this has been he's been very important into launching so many different careers in swimming at the Olympic level. And speaking of the Olympics, the trials would come in, the 2016 trials. This was your chance once again. And I mean, I don't know. I would assume that the stress and the pressure was just astronomically high for you that year. How in the world did you prepare yourself to prepare for these trials?
Well, you would think that I was stressed, but I was actually more stressed in 2012 than in 2016. And I guess it was because of the experience that I was more experienced in 2016. I had gone through so many trials before. that at that point, you know, I was stressed, but it was not the end of the world. I had learned how to manage my stress. And the other thing is also that the trials were at the pool where I was training since 2014. So it was at the Pan Am Center in Scarborough. So it was almost like training at home. You know, I was like doing probably the most important race of my career, but I had my girls around me. I had my family in the stands. It was the lane that I used when I was training every single day. So for me, it was just, you know, do what you know, like how you're supposed to do it, like you're doing every single day for the past how many years. So it was stressful, but you just got to remind yourself, I guess, when you're about to do something stressful, that if you've done the work that you're supposed to do and you've put every effort that you could possibly put in, you're ready. And you just got to stop asking questions and I guess let your body just do the work, because your body knows how to do it. It's been doing it for a lot of years. So just trust yourself. Again, like I said before, it has to come from within, but there's little tricks that you can, you know, learn to have even more confidence. And one of those tricks was for me to realize that I had been training so hard for the last couple of years. It can only go well. There's like, if something goes wrong, it's just because it's part of the game, but you know how to adapt if something goes wrong. And so it can only go as good as you've been training for the past couple of years. And I've been training hard and I know it. And so I need to, you know, trust the process.
Yes, definitely. I can relate to that. Also, it's a similar thing as a pianist as well for a competition or for really just a regular performance. It's there's always this level of doubt of, did I practice enough? Did I get that part right? Am I able? Is my technique clean at that part? Am I able to express that part correctly? And the thing that's different from swimming and piano is that in swimming, there's a very quantifiable result where, did you make the cut? Did you make the time? Mm-hmm. Did you finish first, second, third, whatever? But in music, you don't have that objectivity at all. Especially when you look at the International Showband competition, but really any of the national music competitions as well. It's all about interpretation. So you really don't even know how you're going to be able to pass. And if anything, you don't even necessarily know how you didn't make it. But at the end of the day, because as a pianist, we know that it's subjective at the end of the day, at some point, as long as we've practiced and we've had the performance knocked in, that's it. That we're good. We're all set. We're not going to embarrass ourselves on stage. We're not going to worry about, I mean, and there's also this fear that we have, like, oh my goodness, if I mess up and completely have a memory block at this point, the world's gonna remember me for that, and especially if it's going to be recorded, which is a very reasonable fear, because that has happened in several international competitions in the past. But even then, it's just like, as long as you've practiced, as long as you are very confident, you just have to go through with it. You just have to go for the ride. Because if you don't, then things tend to go badly. It's really weird how the human mind works, where if you think it's going to go wrong, it tends to go wrong. But if you don't think it's going to go wrong, it won't go wrong. It's this kind of a weird, like, human mind and body dynamic that I think is really interesting. But yeah, I mean, I relate to that. I think a lot of our audience, especially those who were former athletes, can relate to that as well, especially with the nature of law school and exams and papers and everything. That's certainly a lesson and a very important virtue that I think we can all learn and relate to at the end of the day.
But you've mentioned before, like, I think there's a certain limit to how prepared you can be for something. I think, you know, if the Olympics were, 2 years later, I would have, trained. You always do the preparation until the very last moment. If you have a trial set for 1 week at a specific date, you're going to prepare until that specific date. Let's say the day before it says, no, it's rescheduled in 1 week. You're still going to prepare for an additional week, but you were ready the week before. So it's like, you got to accept that it's never going to be perfect, but as long as you've done the work and you know deep down that you're ready, you're just going to accept it and just go for it. Because I know that even in my training, I've said it before, like I've trained really, really hard, but could I have trained even harder? Could I have like done, you know, that little extra that I didn't do? Like for sure, like everybody asks questions all the time. Did I do something, you know, that I could have done better? Like for sure I could have done stuff better. I could have like slept more. I could have, you know, did do this and that, but it's never gonna be perfect. And as long as you've done, you know, as hard as you can, like as prepared as you can, it's gonna go well.
Absolutely, absolutely. Interesting note that they noted on that, and I mean, if like to decide, like a little, actually, a good example that I just thought of was what's again going back to I keep talking about the international shuttle competition, so I think people can tell how passionate I'm about not just sports but music as well. They actually delayed the competition a whole year because of COVID, so it was actually supposed to take place last year in 2020, but it actually got moved to this year, October 2021. So you can imagine just how much extra time pianists would have to prepare for that. The thing about piano is that it's very similar. You have to practice each and every single moment, but you also have to realize that if you practice too much, you might actually get worse. And that's happened to me on numerous occasions when I practice. Like I realized that when I'm practicing too hard, I'm just not getting it. Like I'm just failing each part. I'm just like, oh, that's not going to be good. But yeah, it's like you said, it's not, you cannot expect a perfect performance. I mean, if there was a perfect performance, you wouldn't have to worry about the competition in the first place. Honestly, you would, you know, you would already be at the top of the game. But it's always about, yeah, it's about just trusting what you can do and believing in yourself. A very cheesy comment there, believing in yourself. Yeah. But you really have to at some point. Like you really have to. And law is the same thing. You have to believe in yourself. You have to understand, I'm in law school. I'm not an imposter. I made it here for a reason. And the law school admission council, whoever is that part of that particular law school, they saw something in me. So I know I'm doing something right. Right. So, and yeah, I mean, even though I've graduated law school, I think this applies to really any age of law students, past, present, and future. You got to understand that you're there for a reason. Like you are there. You will make it. You can make it. And as long as you put in the work, you will make it, and you will graduate, and you'll have a career. You know, that's just how it works. So, absolutely.
Yeah, you mentioned the imposter syndrome. A lawyer recently told me, lawyer with like 10 years of experience, told me that even after 10 years, they still got the imposter syndrome. Sometimes they don't know what they're doing, you know, because it's like it's such like a large area. There's always new things that even them, like every single day, they might do something that they've never done before, and they just got to like go with it. Again, I think you just got to trust yourself and trust that, you know, you'll make it. You'll make it happen.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And as we all know, you qualified for the trials. And take us back to that moment that you qualified, and that moment when you walked onto that pool deck with Chantal, with Michelle, with Penny. And then the moment where Scott Russell, who actually is a friend of mine, actually, when Scott Russell of CBC Sports interviews the four of you. What was your memory of that monumental moment?
It's very blurry, to be honest, because I was on a little cloud. I was just, my sister was actually on that final with me, or she was like the race just before. So she had, you know, she gave me a big hug. I remember that after my race. And then we went to Scott Russell for the interview. Honestly, I think it's the first time that I go back to that memory, because nobody has asked me that question before, but I guess I was just like on a little cloud. I was watching my family in the stands. I was just so happy to have made the team with those girls, Chantal, Michelle, and Penny. We were training together for the past 2 years. We knew each other, and it's really rare that you make a relay with people that you train with every single day, like 100% the girls we were training together. And usually, you know, because it's the whole country goes to those trials, you might end up on a relay with people that you've never met before, you never talked to before, someone from Vancouver, someone from Montreal, someone from Saskatchewan, like everywhere in Canada. But we were lucky enough to be training all together, and that really helped us, I think, at the Olympics, because we had that chemistry that not every team had. We were like kind of joking around in the ready room just before walking on the pool deck, and so the stress was not as big, because like we knew each other, we trusted each other, like we trusted in our performance, and so that's one that was less stressful, but two, it made it so more enjoyable to do it together.
Absolutely, yeah. That I mean, I can imagine just the energy, even just watching back that race. And you mentioned your sister. Yeah, she was actually swimming in that very same final.
Yeah, I wasn't sure if it was the semifinal before or the final. So it was also a great moment to do it with her.
Yeah. The calls were also amazing. Like Steve Armitage was still announcing swimming back then, and Byron McDonald, whom you and I also both know, also was the color commentator. Legendary announcers in swimming.
Yeah.
You know, define the Canadian announcing in swimming. That is certainly a very, very emotional moment. And afterwards, Rio de Janeiro was your next step. This was the final frontier. This was the end game. Terrible Avengers Endgame reference, but anyways, take us through each moment, from the moment that you stepped onto the Olympic pool, the moment you swam your portion of the relay, the final moment that Penny was swimming the final stretch. Take us through each and every moment of what you remember to the best of your ability.
That's a good thing to say, of what I remember, because again, it was so blurry. I was so in another world that I don't remember a lot. I remember, well, first of all, I was lucky enough to be the first one swimming. So it was like the position that I was, the best, because I had really good dives, and I was consistent in my swims. So they knew that putting me first, they knew that I was going to do like that time. I was not going to go necessarily like 1 second faster, but also not 1 second slower. I was going to do exactly what I was supposed to do. And so that's what you need as a first relay person, to go first, to be consistent. So knowing that, I was lucky enough to be able to watch the last part of the race from the pool deck and cheer for my teammates. The bad side about it is that I didn't have any more control on the race, and I was helpless. I just had to scream as much as I could and hope for the best. And back then, Penny, it was like the first day of swimming. So we knew that she was fast because she had done really good swims at the Olympic trials, but we didn't know back then that she was, that fast, because the 100-meter freestyle individual event came only, I think, 5 days later. And so she went 52 in the individual event, but on day one, we didn't know that she was able to go that fast. And she was going last, and she was going against the Netherlands. So we were racing, us and the Netherlands together, for the third position, because the States and Australia was, I don't want to say way ahead, but they were ahead. We knew that if we were going to win a medal, it was going to be the bronze medal at that point when Penny jumped in the water. And so the last leg, Penny was swimming with Renomi Kromowidjojo from the Netherlands. And Renomi is such a good swimmer. She won gold, I think, in the 50 and the 100-meter freestyle a couple times at the Olympics or world champs. Like, she had world records back then. She was huge. And so to have her against little Penny, 16-year-old Penny, to be honest, I didn't, had 100% trust that Penny could hold until the last, to come third. But you know what? We were hoping for the best and cheering as loud as we could. And eventually, she touched the wall in front of Renomi. And if you type my name on Google, it's like, I think the picture that first comes in is like me, my face when I realized that we came third. It's crazy because it's like I can't believe it. That like a few months before, my goal was to make the Olympic team, and then here we are in Rio and we win a bronze medal, and it is like better than everything that I could hope for. It was like just incredible. It's hard to explain, to also experience that with your friends. Like in that moment, I could hug my friends together. Like again, we were training together, like we knew everything that we went through for the past couple months, years, and we looked at each other and it all made sense, and it was just so crazy. And again, I had my family in the stands. I was able to look at them. I started crying like immediately. So it was a really, really great experience.
Yeah. I was watching that swim actually at my cousin's house in Ottawa. I think that was I was announcing a summer basketball tournament at the time. It was between Carleton and some Div 1 schools in the US. But yeah, I remember coming to my cousin's house and we were watching the swim. At first we were just like, okay, so we've never heard of Penny Oleksiak at that time, because this was her first Olympics. So we're just like, okay, well, we have some Canadians in the finals. Okay, let's see how well we do. And then all of a sudden we see, wait a minute, we're actually gaining. Wait, really? It's like, wait, whoa. And that was certainly, to call it an emotional and an exciting moment is an understatement at this point, because it's far more, like you said, you just couldn't describe it. And I mean, there's also this one on CBC. There was this one moment where I think you mentioned on CBC to Andy Petrillo that you hadn't seen your family in such a long time because you were training all the way in Ontario. You moved to Ontario, like you said earlier. It was just, that, and then all of a sudden your parents are right behind you. I can imagine the emotions just in that moment. Like, you've won the bronze, your friends are there, and now your family's there. Like, that is, wow. Like, that's almost like a storybook ending there almost.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it's a really, even when I look at that video today, I have tears in my eyes because I can go back to how I felt in that exact moment. And I was really emotional because, yeah, like I said before, my parents really helped me in my career to make the right decisions, but they also really supported me. And it's really important to have a team around you, a family that trusts you, supports you, because when you're young, you almost do it for your parents because and eventually I did it for myself. But when I started, I did it for my parents because they were proud of me. And I was like, okay, if I can make my parents proud, I feel like I did a good job. And they followed me in every competitions that I did, if it was in Australia, if it was in France, or, everywhere they followed me. And so it meant something when they were there. And yeah, there's this little thing that CBC made, like a little surprise when I was, answering a question and it came from behind. I was really emotional.
Yeah, I can relate to, just being able to do something to make your parents proud, because I think all of us at the end of the day, we want to do something that makes our family proud, right? And and at some point, it's all about, you have to move on a little bit from that, and of course not completely, but a little bit from that, into to a point where you can make yourself proud as well, and know that, okay, I'm doing something right and I'm doing something well in whatever career pursuit that I had. But yeah, that like I said, this was essentially almost like a perfect storybook ending at this point for you. But you would not stop at the Olympics, of course. You swam for 2 more years, of course, and took a couple of golds from the U Sports Swimming Championships in 2018. I've had the pleasure of announcing those swims as well 3 years ago. And
Mainville, Sandrine Mainville, coming up to the wall in great fashion as she touches with a time of 52.46. That is a new youth sport record for Sandrine Mainville.
That same year, you also retired as well. Looking back on your swimming career, what are the things that you miss the most? And what are the most important lessons that you've learned from your swimming career?
What I miss the most, I guess, is the team. I don't miss the trainings at 5:30 in the morning. I don't miss the cold water. I miss the big competitions. So like every summer, like going to World Championships or, Commonwealth Games, or, you travel for a month with your teammates, you go somewhere exotic and you meet new people, you meet people from all over the world, and you do it with a team around you, and you build relationship with them. That's something that I will miss definitely, because it's not something I think I will be able to recreate in my life, that kind of like experience that I had. The lessons that I learned, I think I've mentioned it a little bit during this podcast, but trust yourself and get out of your comfort zone. I've came to say it so many times, get out of your comfort zone. But I've realized recently that when I'm about to do it, even today, like I'm scared and I don't always want to do it. But it's only after that I've done it that it makes sense. I had my first important trial last week, and the partner that was with me asked me to, plead. So he was examining or interrogating the witnesses and doing all the evidence side of the trial, and he asked me to do the pleading at the end. And at first, I was like, I don't know, I'm stressed. Maybe you're better than me and I shouldn't do it because, maybe I might disappoint the clients. I don't know if it's a good idea. But then, I can't disappoint him. He asked me to do it, so I'll do it. And I did it, and it was great. Even if I was stressed, I was able to overcome my nerves, and I think I did good. And so it's only at the end when I got into the cab that I realized, that this is what I've been telling everybody about my swimming career, but I've experienced it for the first time as a professional. Well, maybe not for the first time, but, getting out of your comfort zone and breaking the ice, and doing something that you've never done before, but you do it to break the ice, to realize that you can do it. It's not that bad. It's not the end of the world. And again, if you've worked hard and if you've done everything that you can do to prepare for this right moment, it's going to go as planned, and you're going to make it work. So yeah, I think those are the lessons that I would tell young athletes or young law professionals when they start their career. It's always, again, when I say that, I always feel like an imposter, because I'm like, who am I to tell people what to do? But I guess this is what I learned, and if people can experience from it, that's good.
Well, yeah. Well, life is always a constant learning experience,
Yeah.
Absolutely, yeah. And yeah, very important lessons and virtues to live by as well. And as a result, speaking about going out of your comfort zone, going from swimming to law school, like that is wow. It's like I mean, why not going from, actually you did law school during when you were swimming, of course. But I guess what I wanted to ask you was finally the question that I typically ask all of my guests is, what inspired you to go to law school?
Oh my God, I don't think I'm going to have the answer that you want, because I don't think that's that inspirational, because I guess it was always in my nature to, want to argue, or like I'm also always, curious, and I always ask questions like why we're doing this. I always want to know, why and the reason behind everything. Even when I was training, like my coach would tell me, he would give me a training and I would ask him, why are we doing this? It had to make sense for it to do it, because if I don't understand why we're doing it, then I don't put as much effort, I guess, because it doesn't make sense. So it was, I guess, always in me to kind of, when I was even like 10 years old, my parents told me that I would make a great lawyer. And, you know, at 10 years old, you want to be, you know, like an actress, or you want to be a teacher. You know, it was like too serious for me to be a lawyer back then. So I was like, no, not for me. But like you mentioned before, I went into health science and CGEP, and, you know, doing chemistry and physics and all of that. I knew it wasn't for me. So I was like, okay, maybe it's time for me to try law. And like any law student, I think you start into this program and you're like, yeah, okay, great. Like, you don't really know, like, if you like it or not until you actually start practicing it, because it's so theoretical in school. And, you know, even if you think that you like it, or even if you don't 100% like it in school, you only know if you like it or not if you start practicing. And it was like kind of a bet for me to go into law, because I didn't know if it was exactly what I wanted to do. But I'm lucky enough to say that it was a good bet, because I really enjoy it now. I think it's a bit similar to, you know, high performance sport, because it's really intense. There's like really stressful moments. It's working hard for, like, you know, working in a big firm, you know, like you have to work hard, long hours, I guess, for really specific moments, especially when you're a litigator. Yeah, so there's a lot of similarities with my career when I compare it to swimming. And so, yeah, I guess, yeah, that's it.
Yeah, no worries. Like, your answer was great. Everyone has a different pathway to law school. So yeah, that's one of the reasons.
What about you?
Yeah, for me, the reason why I wanted to go to law school was because there's a very diverse skill set that you get in law school, right? So of course, you know, law school is the whole purpose of it is to practice law, you know, but aside from just practicing law, there are also a lot of skills that you learn in law school that are so applicable to just about any aspect of society or your own life or your own communities as well. This actually brings to mind something that Prime Minister Paul Martin told me on an earlier episode of the Law School Show. He said that when he went to law school, he knew that law would be something that he would need to do to go into business. And for him, he made a very hilarious comment where it helped me to do anything except play football, you know? So, but yeah, for me, it was a diverse skill set. And of course, I want to practice law, of course. And I also wanted, once again, to be able to have, whenever I talk with people, you know the old saying, the jack of all trades? I don't want to be the jack of all trades. I want to be the master of all trades. Like, I want to master everything that I could possibly ever do, right? So personal friends know me that I pursue a lot of different personal and professional and social pursuits as well in terms of my activities. You know that I do sports announcing as well. Like, I want to do all these things because I can, and because I want to, and because I know that, you know, I don't want to go 30, 40 years into the future and look back and say, oh, I regret my decision. I should have taken that opportunity. Like, I don't want to miss the opportunity. I want to do that opportunity so that in the future, I said, even if I didn't make it, at least I tried. Right. So, but that's my very rambly way of saying, well, I wanted to go to law school, and what inspired me to go to law school. And also my family also told me that I'd make a very good lawyer because when I was a kid, I loved doing public speaking and speeches and all that kind of stuff. And I always felt comfortable doing class presentations. I just loved doing it. That's why I joined this podcast 3 years ago. So, but yeah.
Did you start the podcast yourself?
No. So two gentlemen, back in 2014, their names are Chris Deschen and Rishi Dahir. They created the podcast, and they're lawyers now. They've been lawyers for about, I think, 5 or 6 years or something like that. But they created it, and this grew and grew and grew into what it is today. We're in our 8th season, so it's yeah. So I joined in around 2018. In my first year of law school, and fell in love with podcasting and just kept doing podcasting. So,
well, you're doing great.
Thank you.
Like I said before, you have the voice of a sports announcer, and also a sports. You have the voice of a podcast host.
Oh, thank you. And in your own legal practice, you also, going back to your legal career, you also joined the Sports Dispute Resolution Center of Canada, the Sdrcc. And for me, just briefly looking at the Sdrcc, there are also a number of names that I recognize that are also former Olympians as well, who also went into the legal career. And what inspires you to join the Sdrcc?
Well, I wanted to give back to, the sport community in some kind of way, but also, have a because that's a volunteer role. And I mentioned before that it's important to have balance. Well, I, was looking for ways to do something else outside of my career. And so I joined the Sdrcc because I was actually at a Athletes Can conference one time, and someone on the board approached me. He was a former swimmer Olympian, so he knew me. He knew that I might be a great addition to the board, and so it was my first experience on the board. It was I learned a lot. I'm still there, so it's been a bit more than 2 years now, and I guess I was looking. So the Sdrcc is kind of so as an athlete, you might have some trouble with the law. And so if it's, doping or carding, if you want to appeal a decision from your federation, you might go eventually to the Sdrcc, and it's you have mediators or arbitrators that'll help you resolve your case. And I was lucky enough to not have to use the Sdrcc as an athlete. But I think it's really important, and I think it's great for me to be able to, mix my athlete history with my new career into one specific role. So this is exactly it. That's law with sports. So I think it's great for me, and I learn a lot about sports law, which is something that is completely different from what I do every single day at BLG. And so I guess it might, again, I was talking about opportunities. It might give me new opportunities from me being there. So yeah, we'll see. And you mentioned that there's also other Olympians on the board. There's Alex Harvey, who's a skier who retired, and he's also a lawyer now. So it's great to be with those people who are really inspiring, and I learn a lot, and I think that's a really good experience.
Absolutely. And I mean, our audience is mostly law students, so they of course know this very, very well. But for those of us in the audience who are not in law school, or not law students, who are interested in trying to get into law school or understand the legal system, I mean, the legal system is not just the courts. It's not just you go to trial instantly, right? So I still get this even nowadays. A lot of people ask me, "Hey, do you watch Suits or do you watch Law and Order?" I'm like, "Oh, I mean, it's not. I mean, there are some inspirations, but it's not 100% accurate. And plus, they're American shows, which is very different from Canadian systems. So it's there's mediation, there's arbitration, there's ADR, alternative dispute resolution, and that's something that most cases, or almost all cases, would pretty much go to first before you reach the trial. And even then, only less than 1% of cases actually go to trial, because we would have already resolved that case before we need to go to trial. And typically, and a lot of lawyers would say this, you don't want to go to trial because it's all or nothing. You either get everything you want or you get nothing at all. So you want to leverage your interest there. But yeah, I mean, sports law is something, like you said, very, very different from not just necessarily employment law, but from a lot of other areas of law as well. I mean, at least from my very preliminary understanding of it, it's mostly representing players, representing their interests, and representing them, or signing new contracts. Like the NHL would be a good example of that. New contracts of new athletes who may have gotten drafted to a new team, but they need to sign a specific contract of X number of dollars for X number of years, playing for which specific team. Are you going to a feeder team, or you're going straight to that team, the main team? And it's this whole entire area that is very fascinating. It's a fascinating area of law that not many people actually look at, even those who are legally trained. But when you read about it, and in your case, when you had your immersion into that world, it's so interesting. It's fascinating. And I would imagine the Sdrcc has so many different areas and opportunities where you had that amazing immersion into.
And yeah, so you've mentioned, so there's in sports law, I think there's different subcategories. There's sports agents, so people who represent, football players, hockey players. There's the litigators, so that will be the lawyers who represent either the athletes or the federation, in front of an arbitrator, or if they go see a mediator. But there's also just like lawyers who would work for the federations, who would make sure that, like everything, is their standards, their policies, everything, is, from a law perspective is well managed. So I learned that through my role at the Sdrcc. So it's nice that, I'm able to learn about this outside of, my job, my day-to-day job. So that makes me realize that it's important to, do something outside of your day-to-day job to, stay curious, meet new people, and you never know where this is going to lead you.
Absolutely. Yeah. And as we start to conclude the episode, as you know, COVID's still raging on. At the time of this recording, we are over a year and a half, almost 2 years now into this pandemic. And I can understand it's been very difficult on all of us, on everyone watching this episode or listening to this episode. It seems that, for our entire conversation has been very, 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 very focused on, there's so many opportunities out there, but sometimes a lot of people, and I think a lot of people would relate to this, it just feels like there's barely anything out there at this point because everything's shut down. We're living day to day, basically. We don't know what's going to happen the next week. Omicron just became a variant now, and apparently that's even worse than Delta. And we don't know if this pandemic is going to go down. We're in probably the 5th or 6th wave, or however number of waves that we've had. And law school is already extremely stressful without the pandemic. With this, and now being almost 2 years into it, I'm glad I'm out of law school now, but I cannot imagine what my colleagues and peers who are still in law school, what they're going through right now. What advice would you give to law students and law graduates as they begin their careers in the middle of a pandemic? Like, what advice would you give to them to push through this very difficult time?
Well, on top of everything that I just mentioned, there's one thing that I haven't touched on today, and I think is really important for me, is to have goals. To have short-term goals right now is really important because, like you've mentioned, everything is changing so fast, and it's hard to have a long-term goal that, if you start a career in law, you enter into a law firm, you can't just say, oh, in 7-8 years I'm going to be a partner at that firm. It's too long. You have to have short-term goals to stay motivated, because right now I think that's what people need, is to be motivated by what they're doing and to have short-term goals. And then you just got to establish what those goals are. They should be attainable, not impossible, because if it's too hard to achieve them, then you're going to lose the motivation. And they're going to be concrete goals. So you're going to have concrete goals to be able to do the things that eventually are going to lead you to where you want to go. So, and again, I'm saying that, and even me, I don't have, I'm missing goals, or I'm missing concrete short-term goals to stay motivated. And I'm trying every single day or every single week to make those goals appear in some kind of way. And I think, I just want to say, I realize that it's really hard. And even me, I'm in that process of establishing those goals. But because I know that those are really important, that's what helped me in my career, I'm trying right now to make this effort of establishing those goals, and after that, doing the things that I'm supposed to do to achieve them. Because I mean, if you don't have a goal, I mean, what are you doing every single day? You can't just do your job. Again, it has to have a purpose. If you don't have a purpose, what's the point? And especially right now when we're all working from home, every single day are kind of the same. And so I don't know about you, but like for me, the past year and a half, I've come to a point where I was like, I feel like every week is the same because I'm not going to court. If I am, I'm doing it virtually, but I'm still sitting on my chair at home in my living room. It has to be challenging. And right now I feel like it's all the same and I'm not getting out of my comfort zone. So I have to establish goals to, like go forward to, something. So yeah, I don't know about you, but right. For me, that's it.
Yeah, no. I mean, for me, it's a similar experience as well. Although right now living back at home and moving back from Ottawa back to Mississauga, which is the city where I'm living in, I feel like I'm in like you said, like I feel like I'm in a bit of a rut as well, right? So like you're in the same motions and everything and stuff like that sometimes. But what I do typically is, for me, I started practicing a lot more piano now. Now that I'm back home, I have access to a piano, full-time access to a piano, so I can come back home, I can practice back my old pieces, practice new pieces as well. So if in the very rare event that someone calls me up, hey, we need a pianist for the specific concert. It's like, okay, well, I'm available and just bring me through. And music's also very therapeutic as well. And hobbies in general are very therapeutic from what I found, because it takes your mind off. It takes your mind to a different world. I don't want to say a different world. That just sounds very pretentious, but it just takes your mind off of the stresses of what you're going through each and every day. And it is a very stressful time. Sometimes I do have to remind myself of not being too skeptical of everything around me, because I tend to get really skeptical sometimes. And it's just me. It's my own little issue, my own little battle that I have to face. But it's for me, it's all about being able to get my mind off of what's happening in front of me, and also to shut off the news sometimes, right? The news is just like, 1,000 cases, and then vaccine, we don't know if it's going to be working. We need another booster. It's like, okay, I need some time off of that. I need a, I'm just going to,
sure.
Yeah, just go to YouTube and watch like Mr. Beast or something, or I don't know, like Mr. Beast.
Do the things that make you happy. If you're in a happy mood, everything will be fine.
Absolutely. Well, this was great. Like we went through so much. Like we went through so much in today's conversation, and I mean, I think a lot of people are going to appreciate like the advice that you've given. I think a lot of people will enjoy the stories that you've told, that you've gone through over the last decade, and even more than that as well. It's been a great and enjoyable experience. And Sandrine, thank you so much for coming on to the show today.
Paul, thank you for having me.
And thank you to all the audience for tuning into this episode of the Law School Show. I will leave a link to Sandrine's Twitter handle. I don't remember her Twitter handle off the top of my head, but I'll leave it in the description of this episode if you want to follow her on her social media as well. And yeah, once again, Sandrine, thank you so much for coming on to the show. Tune in next time as we have yet another great guest onto the Law School Show. We're actually coming up to almost 200 episodes very, very soon. So very much looking forward to reaching that milestone very, very soon. But until then, thank you once again for tuning in. Signing off for now, this is Amos Vang. Stay safe and stay healthy. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, click the like button. If you want to see more, subscribe and click the bell icon so you'll be notified whenever we upload. You can also visit us on our website, thelawschoolshow.com, and you can follow us on our social media. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.